All right, so we're back on. So give Dylan his facial hair back. Oh my gosh.
Oh wow.
I had a shave, man. Had to look good for the podcast. So, anyways, yeah, we've talked a lot about this issue specifically. You and I several times over the past couple of years, and we've had our own sort of conversations that have led us to this point. And I figured that this was
Yeah.
this was definitely the best avenue to go. You know, we've had this conversation so many times that it feels like we've hit some talking points that other people wouldn't necessarily get to, just
Yeah, I agree.
specifically because people it feels like people just don't know how to have a conversation anymore, especially about hot topic issues like
You
this.
know how I feel about the anymore part. I would take that off because I think people are the same as they've always been. So I'm not sure that something happened recently in the last 10, 20, or 30 years or so that made this conversation more difficult.
Really?
Like I've said before, I mean, it's about, you having a relationship and an investment in the relationship with somebody or a community of people in order for you to have a conversation. So if you just drop in, every time something happens on the news and you give your uninformed or unconcerned opinion, then you're not really having a conversation either way. So, I mean, there has to be a connection and a relationship and an ongoing willingness to listen and learn from each other for you to really have a conversation.
Yeah, and I think the best analogy that we have gotten to is the analogy of, I guess, just a standard relationship. Like for me and Nikki, if we had gotten to the point to where we had like a yelling match or something like that, we're at that point we're just talking past each other, and it doesn't feel like we're empathizing anymore. It just feels like we want to say what we want to say, and it's not to the point to where she's actually listening to me, where I'm actually listening to her.
And
So
Nikki, for the record, Dylan said, happy life, happy wife. I listen to Nikki and I hear her point of view, and we work collaboratively to make our relationship work. Period.
that's what I said on the record. On the record. So she'll pull up this podcast later on and she'll be like, Dylan, remember what you said. So
Oh, my boy Chase is in here. Beat the
what's up,
possible.
Chase?
That's my best friend from New Jersey.
Hey man.
I had to send him a text. I appreciate it.
Hope New Jersey's going well, man. Be the possible. I like that.
He's the one I had told you about that's doing the fitness. I had told you about checking out his fitness page.
I think I have.
So
yeah, I think I have, man. I think I've checked out your fitness page a couple times. Whenever Dell sends me some of the stuff, I think I actually follow you too.
Yeah,
so
he's an actual guru, but that's a whole nother topic. Yeah. So, but our conversations that you and I have been very open, and we get to say what we want to say and what we don't understand about topics of race, and we're allowed to hurt each other's feelings and to say stuff that is, I don't know, painful might be the word, but just honest. Like some stuff is like, wow, I can't believe you said that, or I can't believe you believe that, and vice versa. But we've been able to do it and still maintain our friendship and our working relationship. So but I think that comes from a place again where, you have a genuine connection and you have, you're seeking to get to know the other person better, and you're not just checking in to comment from afar.
Yeah, and one of the things that's been bugging me a lot lately, especially when you get on social media, and we've talked about this too, about it being just such a small, minute population, but that's probably antagonizing the situation a little bit more. But when I look at some of the content that's on social media, and I see somebody, either giving their opinion, sometimes it comes off as racist, even though it doesn't seem like they're intending it to be racist. Like they're actually trying to have like a conversation or something. And so one of the challenging parts when we're trying to have these conversations is to hold our tongue on what we deem as racist. And we talked about this before, and we said maybe it's not them actually being racist or having racist intent behind it, but it's just a lack of empathy.
Yeah.
And
well, it's definitely an indifference, and but again, it depends on why you're engaging in a conversation. So if I'm engaging in a conversation because I want to win an argument or prove a point, then I have the incentive to use whatever tools at my disposal to win the argument. But if my intention is to listen to you and be a better friend and to strengthen our relationship, then I'm going to come into the conversation with a different perspective. So as a country and as a society, if we're coming into the conversation to make a more inclusive nation and to live up to our ideals, then I would hope that we would come to the conversation with a different understanding, a willingness to learn and understand the historical context that these things are happening in, and then we can build something better together and
Right.
not just try to win an argument about a singular issue.
Right. And Chandler said everyone today is afraid to get their feelings hurt and see just that. Everyone has their own opinions, but people should agree to disagree. Right. So, I guess going on some of your talking points that you had written down.
Oh, we're just gonna put it out there, huh?
Well, we had started talking about
because
them.
I'm organized.
Hey, man, you are the most organized person I've ever met, by far. But we had started talking about your talking points before we figured the audio was cutting out. So, do you want to get to some of those right now, or do you want to hold out?
No, that's fine. We can jump right into to the conversation. I mean, it's kind of what we talked about. I know the other day we were talking about the difference between culture and race and how politics plays into all of this.
Right.
And we had talked about culture, and I was saying, that when you have a majority in the community or in the country, a minority group may create a subculture. And then within that subculture, you do have a difference. And if in our case, if it's based on race, then you're going to have a Black subculture in America, and it is going to be differences of culture and race, and those two things are going to be intertwined.
Right.
And so that's how, and it's the same thing with gay and lesbian communities. It's the same thing with other immigrant communities. So anybody even within, majority white community, there's different subcultures within that community because they're not the majority, and you see those play out. And so the idea is, how do you include everybody equally under the law in this case, even though culturally they may be different from you and you may not have the same understanding or perspective of your status in the country.
So the question is, and this is the stance that I get from a lot of white people that listen to the conversation at hand, is that the law itself would not say that anybody is unequal or unequal in 2020. So I think that's where the conversation kind of diverges a little bit, with people that are just saying certain things like, oh, I see all people, there's no racism in 2020. Like, I think they're taking it from like a logistic standpoint or a law standpoint and not taking it from an empathetic standpoint. So it's hard to kind of have that conversation on, well, where are we talking about race in this? Are we talking about systematic racism? Are we talking about legal racism? Are we talking about race in America as a whole? Like, these are completely different issues. And so we need to figure out.
To answer your question, I guess the way I would look at it is, what is the purpose of your conversation? Again, I go back to that. Because if you and I are talking as friends, and I come to you and I say, Dylan, you know what? I'm feeling really down. I see these things happening in the country, and it brings back feelings of X, Y, and Z, or this is something that I've experienced. And as a friend, I'd like to talk to you about it and, kind of get some things off my chest. So it's a different conversation. And so again, if you're coming at it from, I have to defend that all this statement isn't true because I saw some random person on Facebook post it, then it really affects your motivation and your intent for the conversation. And so I think what we're trying to say is that, oh, hi, Miss Gina. I think what we're trying to say is that, you and I being friends and coworkers, we can have a conversation with each other. And I think the way to move forward more broadly is for people to develop relationships and use those relationships to move the conversation forward, as opposed to random people sending anonymous tweets and Facebook posts, because they're not, you don't know their intention, you have no connection to them. And so there's really no incentive to solve a problem, it's just an incentive to prove a point.
So do you think that social media has sort of highlighted the racial issues?
I mean, social media has highlighted everything because it's another platform for people to share information. So everything is highlighted.
So, well, the reason why I asked that is because, do you think that sometimes, what do you got to sign up for your camp shirt? I got you, Joseph. But do you think that sometimes there is this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that sort of elicits itself in these racial conversations? Like when we're talking about, especially the situation going on with police and the black community, do you think that there might be both sides thinking that they hate each other, and then that sort of elicits a specific response? Like if I put you in a room with somebody and you don't know this person, you don't know the stranger, all you know is he hates you, and that same person I told hates you as well, or you hate them, do you think that that sort of elicits this self-fulfilling prophecy, or do you think that that doesn't really have an effect on the situation involving?
Well, you know how I feel about big words, so self-fulfilling is way too many syllables for me. But I'm just looking in the comments and I see Betty said you would have to be careful with the choice of words, as they can be easily taken out of context these days. And I would take these days off that, Betty, but I would agree with you. But again, your words taken out of context, again, it depends on the context you're having a conversation. Right. So that's kind of why Dylan and I are here again, to kind of share how two people who have a relationship can have a conversation from different points of view. And he doesn't have to worry about me taking him out of context, because I know him and I know he's going to say some weird stuff, and he knows I'm going to say some weird stuff. And we're going to be like, what? You believe that? And then, we kind of talk it through, and then we move forward, and we don't lose any friendship over it. We have, so I think that's the point, is that you have to have, we have to establish those kind of relationships in order to establish a baseline of understanding and connection. Dylan and I often talk about, what would you do if you were in a psychologist or a psychiatrist and you were trying to develop a relationship with your patient? You have to nurture that relationship first before you start giving your diagnosis and recommendations, or trying to, debunk any myths they may have. So without the relationship and the connection, it's going to be hard for you to try to just go into somebody you don't know, or to address a community that you have no connection to make your point.
Chandler, oh my gosh. Oh my god. I'd have to agree, especially since there was a topic that got brought up in one of our previous conversations about the patient that was abused, and we use this from a psychological standpoint, and we talked about how how do you treat a patient that's abused, every time, specifically by like a male or something like that, and now all the interactions they have with that male, they've become sort of defensive. So how does that, how do you solve that? How do you get past that? How do you build that relationship with the person that sees you as the abuser or the oppressor in this case? Is there a way to do that? Like, how do you, so if I'm going to a girl that actually has been abused in a situation, and now she has become defensive, even though I have no intent to her, what is the way to go about this? Like, what is the way, how do I build that relationship?
Well, I mean, I guess you would have to show her that you're interested and that you're willing to make the effort to prove to her that you don't want to harm her, and you want to do that because you care about her, right, and you look forward to building a relationship together. So, but the same conversation would be different if you were just in passing, or if you saw her Facebook page and you didn't know her, and you just said, oh, well, you just need to get over it, and it happened 10 years ago or 100 years ago, or I didn't do that to you, and so you can't hate all men, or whatever your comment is in passing, it doesn't really build that connection that she would need and that you would need to build a better environment for both of you. It's just somebody making a random point to win
Right.
an argument. And I think, again, that's the kind of point. Like, we're not on here reciting our random facts about race in America and all this kind of stuff. It's more about how you and I can connect and how other people can connect and then have the conversation. Because if you're disconnected, or if you're just following, bait on social media, it's going to be hard for you to understand anything, because you don't really have an incentive, same incentive to understand.
Right. And so, what's up, Martin Luther? Thank you for the follow, buddy. Um, Chandler says, but at the end of the day, it's her choice, not yours. Does that make sense? So you have to be able to prove yourself, right?
But does that? And I think that's right. But if you take it out of the relationship context and put it into a racial context, that becomes a whole different conversation, and people have different feelings about, having to prove yourself in a racial context. And so, I think you're onto something, Chandler. But again, it's because, and Dylan and I have talked to this, because you really think this person is attractive, or they'd be a good partner or whatever, you're willing to go the extra mile to make this work. And so the question is, as a country and as a society, are we willing to go the extra mile to make this work? Or do we just want to prove our points?
Right. And so I think the statement here, or not the statement, but I guess the the point that we were trying to make, in the point by using the relationship analogy, especially with the traumatized individual, is I understand the traumatic experience that of slavery. And I've read a lot of Carl Jung, and Carl Jung talks about the collective unconscious and how collective unconscious can develop into archetypes and archetypal structures. But that sort of represents itself in your unconscious. And Carl Jung was fantastic, and I highly recommend him to anybody to go check him out. But what he states is that there can be generational traumas that can be passed down from individual to individual, even though the experience is not there anymore. So, but the trauma can still be lived. So I understand how slavery is still impacting the psyche of today's world in 2020. And that's the reason why we used the analogy of the individual, because again, you're still having to nurture that relationship and build the trust back. You're still having to figure out, all right, well, what the hell can we do to make sure that
we're not really necessarily building it back. It's establishing it in the first place. I mean, again, if you have a subculture of the American society who are American citizens, but there's kind of an asterisk next to it. So it's kind of a little something different about it. It's got some caveats. So when you're celebrating things, you're like, oh, 1776 and all, this is when we, it's like, yeah, but that wasn't really, you can talk about the roaring 20s. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the best time. You want to go back and make America great again, or the good old days. And I'm thinking, well, what era are we talking about? Because I don't want to go back too far,
Right.
And so again, it depends on your perspective. And that's why the collective relationship, everybody, we have to include everybody in our image of what our country is. So it can't just be, what we thought America was like in the 50s and 60s, when in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of suffering and pain and disenfranchisement going on. And so, but we have to be aware and connected to people enough to even consider those kind of thoughts. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people are excluded from this ideal thought that America is land of the free and home of the brave and all these sorts of things that we talk about and cliches that we use. And all those things are true, but there is an asterisk next to a lot of those things because it does have some conditions along with it. And so I think, again, going back to the relationship part of it, is that we have to consider everybody and how we make that real for everybody, and how do we help them realize that if we want this relationship to work. And that only works if you're invested in everybody having that same type of experience.
Right. And so sometimes the conversation diverges a little bit from that point specifically. Is you'll have white people, and especially on my Facebook feed, they'll feel like they haven't done anything racist, they haven't done anything wrong, they don't explicitly go out of their way to say, you know, anything bad about black people, but they feel sort of attacked at this point. And so I'm trying to work out the solution here. Like, what is the disconnect? What are we missing? Like, what are white people not getting? What are black people not getting? Like, what is the disconnect? Why aren't we talking about this?
Well, I guess I would have to ask you, when I say something, do you feel attacked?
Not explicitly. No, not outright. No.
I mean, in our conversations, have I ever said anything that made you feel like, oh, he's attacking me as a white person?
No. You have not specifically.
But why is that, though? Why is that you don't feel that way?
Maybe because I know the context behind what you're saying. Because if I would go on social media, though, if I'd go on social media and I hear, or I'll see something about, you know, all white people are the devil, then I'm like, well,
who said that, though? I mean, what authority do they have? What connection do they have to you? And it's probably none or very little. So again, it doesn't matter what they say. I see all kind of stuff.
Right. So then
online. So, but they don't have a connection. If I need to be comforted or spoken to or to discuss something, I call my friends. I call people that I know and trust. You don't just go find a random person to talk to. But when stuff like this happens, we go to social media and we find some random person, and then we try to engage in an argument with somebody who we don't have a connection with. And I think that's the wrong way of going about it. You need to start with your community, with your circle, with your friends, and have a conversation. And then you don't have to worry about being, you know, misunderstood. Or even if you are, there's an incentive for you to regain that understanding and to work through whatever the misunderstanding is.
Right. And I think that sort of goes both ways. Because if I get on social media, because it's like the sample size is like 1,000 people.
Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Jordan. Hey, Strickland. What's up,
hey,
guys?
Strickland.
So the sample size is about 1,000 people, and I've not unfriended anybody specifically because I want to see all sides. Like, I want to see like what people are thinking, what people are doing. And I 100% agree. Like, start with your circle first. Start with your immediate close friends and group, and don't take the social media, because you get like this highlight bias from social media, and it goes both ways. Like, you know, it's not just 1,000 people. Caleb,
I was thinking the same thing, Caleb, but I wasn't going to say it.
Low-key flexing over here, you know.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm just kidding. But, I mean, for real, though, like, the highlight bias on social media is just so apparent. Like, you could go on social media and see, like, white people talking about, you know, racism, and then you'll see black people talking about racism, or Asians talking about racism. And so it's like what you choose to search, or what your friend group diverges, or what that small little sample size has to offer you. So I 100% agree that you should start with your immediate friend group rather than going to social media, because then, again, going back to our comments earlier, you sort of create this self-fulfilling prophecy, and I don't like that word.
But so. I would challenge you to, you're not going to start a conversation with me about something that somebody else said on Facebook that I have no idea who they are. I mean, I just I don't compute that, because I don't know who that person was. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't have any connection or relationship, and I don't know what their motivation or incentive is for a solution. But I know you, and I know the value of our relationship. And so I can start with that. And so that's my point, is that we're not going to be able to solve 400 years of a situation that we created as a country by, randomly commenting on people's Facebook page. But we can start building communities and building relationships in our workplace, at our gym, at our churches, in our friend groups, while we're on Twitch playing video games or whatever it is. I think it's time to start having those conversations, so that, because that's how things get better. It's not going to be, everybody's going to come to a consensus on Facebook. I mean, there's just no incentive to do that.
Right. And a lot of the time, the people that are posting on Facebook are so far gone, you're not even going to change their mind anyways. Like, it's sometimes sad. Thank you, Dylan, for discussing the issue. This is what civilized conversation looks like. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate that.
I mean, it's
she's biased because she's my mother.
Yeah,
I love you.
But I mean, our conversation has been a lot more detailed, and so we haven't really had a detailed conversation. We're just starting with how can get to the detailed conversation. Because if I don't know you, then I probably wouldn't talk to you the same way as if I do. But like Dylan and I have had some specific conversations about specific issues related to race where we disagree completely. And it's like, I don't know where you got that information from. He was like, no, that's not statistically accurate, and this. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not coming at it from a statistical standpoint. And we get into the academic validity of the data and all that kind of stuff. And so, but you have to get to a certain point to be able to even do that. And so that's kind of what we're saying, is like, you need to start with the people start with people who you're surrounded by, and you have that conversation with them, and you as a friend group decide, okay, this is how we want to be, or this is how we're going to act, or this is how we view our role in making things better.
Right. And so I guess the next step would be, like you were saying, is integrating people into your community and reaching out to people in your church. And one of the issues with that is, like you said, when you have a culture with the asterisk by it, it creates a subculture. So now we have privately owned Black communities, or privately owned, Black churches, or Black barbershops. So the question is, how do we become inclusive at that point?
I mean, it starts with the individual person. I mean, we created these systems, so we're gonna have to work to break them down. And we didn't build them in one, 5-week or 6-week movement.
Yeah, there was 100 years process.
It was years and years of ingrained, intentional, systematic approach to separating people based on the color of their skin. So we have to put as much effort in breaking that down as we did in building it up, and not be as we did it ourselves, but as we as a society, as America, we put a lot of energy and time and legislation and money behind building a system of separation. So now we have to work equally as hard to counteract the effects that still are with us today. But we have to have the motivation and the incentive and the relationship in order to do that. And until we get that, it's not going to be a way to move forward, because I don't know that everybody has the same type of relationship and the incentive to do it.
Right. And again, that goes back to the point to where, even though slavery happened, however many years ago, we're in 2020 now. Even though none of us were involved in that process, it's still our collective responsibility to kind of work together to figure out what to do at this point. So,
but I mean, 9/11 happened before some people were born, but we've changed the way we get on planes, and we've changed a whole lot of stuff since then. So you don't have to be there when something happens to deal with the ramifications of what the after effect of it is. So I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed since 9/11. You usually could walk into an airport and go right into the gate and wait for somebody, and you didn't need any kind of pass or anything, and it wasn't all these pat downs and stuff. But now, because of 9/11, they don't let anybody get close to the gate. So it's so many things that changed. And I wasn't there in New York or wherever they, crashed the planes, and I wasn't personally involved in that either. But I still deal with the after effects of that situation, and that was a one-time event. But I mean, again, the system was intentionally built, and things were done intentionally to divide us. So if it was done intentionally, you have to be equally as intentional in breaking that down and bringing people together if that's the outcome that we want, and if we agree on that. And that's the issue. Is like, how do you start to be intentional about the process? So you and
So
I had talked recently about how the difference between saying, well, everybody's welcome here, and sending somebody an invitation. So I know I'm probably welcome. You can't legally deny me entry, but that's completely different from me getting an invite saying, hey, you can come.
So if it's about creating community connections and having empathy for one another, where do you start, or where does the conversation then change to? We have had legal processes, like you were saying with 9/11. Now the whole procedure has changed. Like there have been legal issues that have, like, for example, and I hate to bring this one up, but Jim Crow, like the ending of segregation, as shitty as that was, like the fact that there was even a thing, like, is that not taking a step in the right direction? Like where do you connect empathetically to talk about the next step? Like to say, hey, these are the things that we have done, and in 2020, here's the conversation that we should be having. Like,
I think it depends on if you need credit. Because again, it's a different kind of conversation. When I talk to you, I don't feel like I need credit for what I've accomplished as I'm talking to you about your challenges or your pain. So I don't necessarily need to list all my accomplishments that I've
right.
made as you describe what's ailing you, or what challenges, or what you feel like you're going through.
Right.
So and again, if we use the 9/11 analogy, it would be, well, we changed all the laws, so therefore there's no more security risk. But I don't think anybody believes that's true. We need those laws in place to reinforce the security. And so, but again, in different contexts, we understand it. But in a racial context, we have problems with trying to wrap our head around what we should do next and what should be the desired outcome.
That makes
And I
sense.
think we each personally have to explore what is the challenge for us to, to work towards this intentionally. Because
Right.
it's not something that's going to go away on its own if we just ignore it or pretend like it's not there, or, hope some random law that we don't even know the language of is going to fix it. I mean, most of us don't know what's in most of our laws, but we'll be quick to cite one if we think it'll help our argument. And so that's when you get to the intent. Are you trying to, get rid of the argument, or avoid the argument, or win the argument, as opposed to gain an understanding? And I think that's where we need to start, is with our intention. Is our intention to gain an understanding? And then once you have an understanding and the relationship, then I think it becomes a lot easier for us to then move forward. Now, I don't know that we're there yet.
So Chandler asks, do you think everybody nowadays feels like everyone is out to get them because of bad news all the time and all that?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how people feel. I mean, I know how people feel that I talk to and people that I know, but I wouldn't say that's a representative sample of anything. And it would be conversation that you would have about people that you care about and that you're connected to, and then they could tell you how they feel.
Right. Sorry, I had to get rid of a user. No one's winning right now. Everything is political. If you want healing, it begins with a healthy conversation. What is the desired outcome specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about a win necessarily. I don't see it as a game where there will be winners and losers.
Right.
I think we're trying to build a better society and build upon the promise that America was founded on. So I don't know that there would be a winner and a loser. And as far as things being political, I mean, we live in a political society, so of course things are going to be political. But again, that's we can choose whether or not we want to come to that political nature, or do we want to make connections with people, and what is our intention and what is our desire, because the outcome is going to be what you want it to be. What do you want to happen? What do you think is the right thing? So if your desire is to really, you know, bring people together and to have an inclusive society, then that would be the desired outcome. Some people have different desired outcomes. So it would really depend on who you're talking to. And if you're not talking to a wide variety of people, then your perspective may be limited.
Wouldn't that mean that both sides would have to agree onto specific terms, though, or be empathetic to each other?
Are you asking me that question, or is that
Yeah,
from?
yeah, that's for you.
You know, it's kind of hard to say sides to it, because that just makes it sound like it's a battle or a game where we have teams and one person is going to beat the other. But I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, forget the word.
Again, I
Forget
go
the
back
word
to the
side.
conversation. I have to bring it back to the conversation with you and I, because that's really what it is. It's people coming together and having a conversation. So I don't try to figure out how to come to terms with you and how to negotiate with you. I listen to what you say, and then I communicate back with you, try to get you to see, where I'm coming from, and try to learn and understand from your perspective and what you see. And when we get to the point, it's like, okay, well, I have enough respect and concern for this person that I'm willing to do some things and to be intentional about how we move forward. Then that's how we move forward. But if we're
Right.
still trying to figure out how one side is going to convince the other side, and how, then we're not where we think we are, or where we hope we are.
Yeah, I think that that's the wrong way to approach conversation. So, so, dang, I just lost my train of thought. A question for Dell: who would you main on Overwatch?
If that's about a video game,
It's
I know
about a
you
video
should know.
game,
I know
man.
nothing about video games at all.
One second, the dog is yelling in the background.
Mark is always invited into my conversation.
So the way we talk about it is it's as if we're trying to say see past color, but that seems to be like a pushback right now. Do you think that people should see color still, or see and appreciate culture? Or do you think that we should just view everybody as individuals and equals regardless of skin or wherever your background is?
I mean, culture and race exist now because we created it.
Right.
So now we can't pretend like it doesn't.
Right.
So I mean, it's a thing. So now we have to live with that. There are Black people, there are white people, there are gay people, there are trans people, there are all these different types of people that live in our country, because that's how we've labeled or categorized people.
But
so now that they exist and these subcultures exist, that's fine. The question is will everybody be treated equally under the law, and will they experience America the same way? And
right.
I think that's the question. And is that the desire, is for everybody to be treated and experience America the same way?
Well, my question comes from connecting empathetically. So should you... So again, there is a conversation going around like you should see color when there's a giant mass surplus of white people saying, I don't see color. I was raised to not see color. I see everybody equally. Everybody is equal. So when we talk about being empathetic, should the defining factor for how you approach somebody be their race or their culture? When we're talking about inclusivity, should that be a part of the conversation?
I think we should be as intentional, or equally as intentional, as we've been in the past to separate ourselves. Because the reason we're separated is because there was an intention to separate. So we can't just eliminate those rules and then think everything's just going to fall into place. There's work that needs to be done.
Right.
There's intention that needs to be in place for that. And so the answer to the question that you asked is going to be kind of the same as, like, it's a difference between saying we're all are welcome and sending an invitation. And so, and if you're willing, and if you think it's too much work to send an invitation, or if it's too much to ask, then it may be because you don't have the relationship and you don't have the incentive to engage whoever it is that you feel like needs to be engaged. So, I mean, that's why I say it goes back to the relationship. So if you have, we'll use special needs, for example. So if you have a camp and it's open to people with special needs, but you don't reach out to the special needs community to let them know, hey, you guys are open to come to our camp. Yeah, technically your camp is open. But if they don't know, or they don't feel that, because, for the past, 200 years, they hadn't been allowed, and now all of a sudden you changed your rule, but you didn't really, broadcast it or say anything about it, or there was no equal effort to include as it was to exclude, then, you may, and if that's not your intention to do that, it's kind of like, okay, well, fine, I followed the law, I met the rule, you can come if you want to. Then, I mean, you kind of have to go to the intent of the person, and what is it that you're looking to do? Are you looking to meet a legal standard, or are you looking to comply with the regulation, or are you looking to reach out and really be inclusive and to do the work that would be involved in doing that? And that's where you need to have the connection, because there is some effort involved in that, and you only put in effort for people that you care about or that you can empathize with.
Right. Chandler says, there's a difference between culture and color, in my opinion. One of my close friends' parents adopted him and brought him back from Jamaica, so he grew up with that culture, even though he's white. So we've talked about this several times, and this goes into the context of white privilege or systematic racism. And the reason why I can understand white privilege is from more of a cultural perspective rather than a racial perspective, specifically because I can empathize, or people can empathize with me, because they assume that I adopt more of the white cultural standards based off my skin tone. Like, that's so I'd have to agree that I don't think that culture and color are synonymous, though, especially when we're talking about subsets of cultures.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter what any one of us believes, what we
Yeah.
hold to be true. I mean, I don't think we came on here to prove a specific point. I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't research any data. I don't bring any statistical analysis to it. So you're more than free to believe whatever you want to about culture and race and all that good stuff. And that's fine. But again, when it comes to us being friends and you being able to understand how I feel about a situation or
Right.
where I'm coming from, then that's what's important. And I think as a society, if we can get to the point where we actually care and are incentivized to be concerned about people who live different from us culturally or regionally or whatever sexual orientation or whatever the difference may be, then that's when we can start to have a legitimate conversation. Otherwise, it's just trying to prove a point for your side,
Right.
and that's not really beneficial.
That's fair. I 100% agree with that. I think it starts with the empathy that, I mean, we've been talking the whole podcast about, is figuring out how we can be inclusive. Well spoken, Dell. Couldn't agree more. It's the inclusivity of it, and figuring out how we can connect with people on a broader scale. So,
Well, I mean, we have to ask ourselves the question, like, what do we want? What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to be? So, like you were saying, a self-fulfilling prophecy, that could be a positive thing too, if we make it a positive thing. So, I mean, if we want to be inclusive and we want to have, a society that, really is culturally and racially intertwined, then we can do that. if that's what we want. But I think it's some work we have to do interpersonally first to get to that point. And
Right.
I don't know that we're having that conversation. I think a lot of it is still, is this really true? Is that really happened? Is somebody overreacting to this? Are people indifferent? Are people racist? And all those kind of words. And some of these words are just outdated. And the definitions and the meaning of the words have, you know, mutated over time, where people say racist and they think it means one thing, and somebody else is using the term and we talk about systemic racism and people hear something else, and then certain things trigger people to be defensive and it triggers somebody else to be aggressive. And because we don't have a connection with each other, we don't even know who we're talking to and what the other person's motivations are. We're just, making comments to each other in passing.
Right. Inclusivity. This man's got a college degree. Love you, bombs. Finna start up my stream. Good talk, cuz. Thank you, Chandler. Love you, buddy. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for asking questions. So I know you've made the point to be intentional about how we come at and approach some of these systems.
Well, let me just clarify. I'm not suggesting that people be intentional.
Okay.
I'm saying if this is whatever your motivation is, then that's what you should do. So I don't really have a preference on what you are, whoever you are, whatever your beliefs are. But as far as if we're saying, hey, this is how we want to, what's the solution, or how do we make things better? My idea is that if the division was intentional and planned and executed, that we have to use the same amount of energy and effort to undo it if that's what we want to do.
That makes sense. Makes 100% sense. So, yeah, no, man, I really appreciate you coming out and doing this podcast. I bugged you enough to do it with me.
Yeah, because I really didn't think I wanted to do it, but convinced me to do it, because I felt like we were accomplishing more in our conversation, you and I, than but I think it's good to share with people how the conversation can go and what the criteria are for having a productive conversation, and kind of get off the whole, when somebody says something on Facebook and this is what I think about that, or this is what I saw in the news, and I don't think that's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Especially if you're uninformed anyway. So if you don't know much, then people who don't know much, you really can't have a really good, intelligent conversation with them.
That's why I appreciate the conversations that I have with you, because again, part of the issue is having a conversation with somebody that's on your intellectual level. And I'm not saying that the people that aren't having these conversations aren't intellectual. It's just when you have these conversations, you have to make sure that you guys come from an understanding on what the conversation is going to be about, that you appreciate each other, that you're going, because we've had these conversations before, and we've called each other after and just been like, yo man, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you kind of broadening my perspective and opening me up to more views. I mean, that's pretty much how our entire how our discussion goes. So
I've definitely learned some stuff from you that I never really considered. I was like,
oh, and vice versa, man.
And it wasn't my initial reaction either. It was just kind of like afterwards. It's like that was different. I never thought anybody actually thought that, but okay,
Yeah, same here, man. I mean, we come from two different generations, and not to highlight your age, but kidding.
Oh no. You hope you look this good when you get my age.
Hey man, I'm just saying. I hope I do. But for real though, I mean, coming from two different generations, we've grown up with two different experiences. Right. So I mean, it's the fact that I've been able to have these conversations with you has definitely been enlightening. So
same here.
Again, I completely 100% appreciate you and appreciate you doing this podcast, and I definitely owe you lunch on Thursday. So that goes on the record on podcast. So so everybody, I 100% appreciate everybody coming out tonight and keeping the conversation really cool and collected. I only had to ban one person, so
I encourage everybody to have this kind of conversation. I think that was the point of us doing this. The point of me doing it was like, I told Dylan I didn't want to come on and be like the expert for all Black people to come on and talk about it. I was more going to talk about his and our relationship and how we are having the conversation. Hopefully that would encourage other people to do the same. And I feel like that's what we need to do. And then once we do that and we have a better connection with each other, we can start realizing what types of things we can do together to make things better.
Right. And again, neither of us are the representatives for anybody. This is just how to have a conversation. No. Well, this is just how to have a conversation, man, about hard topics that, people are connected to. So, love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for keeping it respectful. I really appreciate everybody. Again, I only had to ban one person, so that was awesome. That's actually my first ban.
Really? What did I miss? I missed it.
He said something like discrimination was okay if you're not doing it based off color. And so I didn't know what he was saying. He might have meant something different by it, but I didn't want to take the chance. So
okay.
So went ahead and just gave him the boot.
Yeah.
Okay. Social media gives a little insight as to what people are thinking, which allows you to process the situation in order to help people move forward and not backwards. LMAO. What did I miss? So thank you again, everybody. This has been Daydreams with Dylan. This has been Dell. Thank you. And Dell, I'll keep you on the side for just a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast. So thank you, everybody. I love you. Thank you for daydreaming with us. Have a good evening.